To order. The first item is board members is roll call. We have Mr. Lejeune, Mr. DeZarmo, Mr. Bergeron, Mr. Edmond, and myself. We do have a quorum, and Ms. Mason. On our agenda, we'll go one at a time. 2.1 is finance. Mr. Dugas, will you take over, please?
Yes, sir. The first item is the budget recap and timeline. As you can see, March 13th, today, we have a list of all the budgets we're going to go through today. The next meeting scheduled will be April 17th. In that, we will be looking at the general fund budget, the series, different series of cost centers, 1,100 through 1,500. Also, at that point, the group insurance fund and the sales tax fund. That is the sales tax fund that collects sales tax, the sales tax office. On April, if everything is approved at that point, we will bring back everything one more time on April 22nd, which once we get approval, that's everything comes back, including the general fund and everything being presented today. Once that gets approved by the board, it will go into public advertisement and the 15-day required inspection period. And we will have a public hearing held May 8th at 4 o'clock, followed by a special board meeting at 4:30 to adopt the budget. That's the current budget recap and timeline. Any questions?
Continue.
The first budget up for review is the Special Revenue Fund. This is your federal and state grants, your title programs, LA4 for pre-K programs, any donations or any kind of funds reserved for special purposes would be in the Special Revenue Fund. This is a fund that will probably change quite a bit as we get more information. A lot of this is based on last year's allocations. Once we get new allocations, we will come to the board with revised budgets and as the year progresses and we get that information. Any questions on the special revenue funds? The next fund is the LPSS Capital Improvement Fund. This is basically one of our two capital funds. This fund concentrates on smaller projects. This year, what you're seeing, or every year is what you're seeing, the amounts in here are not necessarily the entire budget for that particular project. If that particular project had started in a previous fiscal year, this is only an estimate of what we think we'll need in this fiscal year to complete the project. So you may be seeing some projects that look big with small budgets. That's only because we believe that by the end of June, when this budget rolls over, that project will be substantially completed. So that may be why some of the amounts look small for some of these projects. The funding for both capital funds starts with a $2.5 million general fund transfer to each of them, being a total of $5 million. That's the base. Then we take 25% of every dollar that is above budget for sales tax collections and accumulate that in the current year for next year's projects. So we know how much money we have to spend on capital. It's already in the bank. It isn't an estimate because we're issuing contracts on this stuff. So we want to make sure we have the money. So that was started years ago, and I think it's a really good conservative way to budget things. That being said, we also, if I can bring your notice to the note at the bottom, that all 25 fiscal projects were pre-funded in the fiscal year 24 per board action on February 7th. So what you're going to see, everything in here is carry forward projects, because basically we revised, and this is to both capital budgets, the fiscal year 24 budget to allow staff to start some of these projects over the summer when school can be closed and it's a safer environment to do some of these things. Since the cash was already in the bank, I was okay moving forward with these projects and moving them to fiscal year 24 so we can start them sooner than later and get them completed sooner than later. Any questions on this particular capital project budget? Self-funded construction is the next one. That's our second capital budget. This fund was set up to cover larger capital projects to avoid the issuance of debt. Years and years ago, we were issuing debt for things like roofs and plumbing and HVAC. And we decided to start setting money aside for those kind of projects, so we give the board the opportunity to issue debt for new schools and things that the public would see in a more better light than issuing debt to just repair things. So we've been pretty successful in that effort so far. We've been lucky to have sales tax growth to be able to fund some of these larger projects with self-funded construction funds rather than go and get extra debt. Same as the other fund, all these projects were pre-funded into a revision of fiscal year 24's budget so that we could start on them earlier and get those projects done faster. Any questions on the self-funded construction fund? The next fund is the 2023 Bond Construction Fund. This is the debt fund that was set up once we issued debt to build Lafayette High, Bob Lilly Elementary, and Prairie Elementary. Originally, we started with a little less than $163 million of debt. What you see coming forward is what's remaining, as what we project to be remaining at 6/30, and the expenditure of those funds basically to finish Lafayette High and round out Bob Lilly. So these particular funds are put in a separate fund because they have limited restrictions on how you spend the money, how fast you spend the money, and what kind of interest you can get on this in terms of arbitrage. So that's why this fund is set up separately. It will go away once we spend all the funds. Any questions on the 2023 Bond Construction Fund? The next fund is the Southside High Construction Fund, and you may be saying, why do we have a construction fund for Southside High? It's been open 4 or 5 years. That's because if you look at the note at the bottom, staff has experienced a very high level of difficulty working with USDA to get these remaining funds spent. So we hopefully will get this project finished, this outdoor covered area with furniture. I know Robert's working very hard with the USDA to try to get proper approval. They are very strict on how you spend the money. This is not like a regular grant where we can spend the money and get reimbursed. We have to request the money and receive the money before we pay anything. So even though it's an outstanding invoice, if we don't get the money, we can't pay it. And right now, we're having very, very much difficulty communicating with the USDA, but we're working on trying to resolve that issue. So I'm hoping not to have this fund next year. Any questions on Southside High Construction Fund? The next fund is the Truman Pre-K Construction Fund. This school was paid 100% by ESSER funds, by federal funds. So that school is basically almost complete. We have to spend these funds by September of '24, so this is just an amount that we estimate may be spent in next fiscal year to finish off that construction project. Any questions about the Truman Pre-K Construction Fund? These are ESSER funds. The remaining ESSER funds for regular ESSER stuff is back in the Special Revenue Fund in the beginning, so this is just kind of a little bit different. We had to account for it in a separate fund because it is capital money. Any questions on the Truman Pre-K Construction Fund? The next fund is school food service budget. That budget is pretty much self-explanatory. This is our child nutrition program, and it receives, of course, sales and some federal money, a little bit of MFP money, and some pass-through general fund money. Basically, that is the projected budget for 24-25 for school food service, child nutrition. Any questions on this budget? The next budget is the 2002 half-cent sales tax budget. This is a special sales tax that was, of course, passed in 2002. It's got some priorities, and it's got an administrative plan. So basically, the major changes to that, if you look at Note 3, is that we're going to be funding some teacher in-service days and one additional professional development day, as well as professional development for classroom teachers. And then a lower class size, we have the increase due to the increase in teachers to lower class sizes. That will be funded 100% by the tax. Any questions on the 2002 half-cent sales tax?
With the lower class size, can you explain that line item, please?
I will ask Jennifer to respond to that.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Mason. The lower class size is, so our standard ratio currently right now in kindergarten through third grade is 24 students to 1 teacher. In fourth grade, it is 26 to 1. And in fifth grade and over, it is 29 to 1. One of the 5 dedicated areas for the funding can be used to lower class size. And some of our schools, it is more beneficial to have like targeted pre-K. We have about 20 to 1, 15 to 1 instead of the 24. And some of our low-performing schools, we put 20 children in a room to 1. So we staff a school at the standard board-approved ratio, which y'all voted in February. Then we do a separate staffing of what it would look like to add those additional teachers to lower the class size. And that is how we come up with the number.
Okay, can you tell me which schools that serves?
Currently, it is across the district. It's not at just one school or one zone. So currently in middle school this year in staffing, we have an extra English and math because the way that English and math are blocked with 90 minutes in order to get children to move into singletons into blocks, it is very cumbersome and the numbers end up going over the ratio. So by adding those, we can lower. It could be in targeted pre-K, which could be across the district. It could be any school, Evangeline. We use it for intensive algebra at Acadiana High, Como, Southside. It lowers the numbers there. So we strategically audited every position that we had to make sure that it met the administrative document.
Thank you.
I believe there's a request by staff to have this, the portion as it relates to staffing and hiring be approved so staffing process can start, was the request of staff.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
Staff is asking that projected revenues and expenditures for this fund as it relates to staffing and hiring be approved early so that the staffing process for next school year regarding these positions can begin before the adoption of the entire budget in May.
You want a motion?
Yeah,
tonight?
we would need a motion for that.
Entertain a motion.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion. That's a very long. I'd like to take the, make a motion to accept the recommendation.
There's a note on the bottom, or it's
I'm
actually.
sorry, is there?
Recommended that, I'll read it.
Okay. Well,
Do I have a second? Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Mason, second by Mr. Bergeron, that the board approves the proposed 2024-2025 Lafayette Parish School Board 2002 half-cent sales tax projected revenue and expenditures as it relates to the staffing hiring for fiscal year 25. Is there any public comment? Mr. Espinoza?
Good evening. My name's Rodolfo Espinoza, teacher at Lafayette High, former president of LPAE. I'm mainly here because I'm old, and I've been involved with the 2002 tax issue since its inception. I've given each of you a packet on the dais here of documents mostly from the time of the proposal and the debate. It's in front of the dais here. First, the question of why just classroom teachers. In 2000, the board and Superintendent Zolkowski proposed a tax for salaries for all positions in the district. The tax was defeated. The Chamber of Commerce greatly opposed that tax. The following year, the board, new Superintendent Easton, and a variety of community groups, including the Chamber of Commerce, created a committee to study the issue. They considered various proposals. Ultimately, the committee and the board decided on a very specific target: classroom teacher raises. The intent, which became a rallying cry for approval, was to get Lafayette's teachers' salaries to #1 in the state. At that time, they were ranked 27th. The focus was on using these funds to maintain salaries at among the highest levels in the state. On the issue of classroom teacher, Dr. Easton and the board clearly defined a classroom teacher consideration was given to define teachers, anyone on the teacher, they did consider anyone on the teacher salary schedule. But the board chose a narrow definition because based on their polling, they feared that the public would vote against the tax if it included personnel outside of the classroom. You can see his definition in the press release to the public. You can also see in his letter to parents his top 3 reasons for the tax. Number 1, recruit the best teachers. Number 2, keep our very best teachers. Number 3, recruiting and keeping the best will give us students that our students the best that they deserve. In the packet, I've also included several news articles from that time. After the articles, there's a comparison with St. Tammany Parish schools, which was of great concern to them at that time, and part of the reasoning for the tax, which I've outlined in the cover letter. There are also 2 draft proposals rejected by the committee and the board, one for all employees and one for technology. In 2015, there was much debate about positions and their changing definitions and titles, and whether or not they would be eligible for 2002 tax. So the administration in 2015 created a rubric that I've also included at the end of your packet to further clarify those eligible for these funds and stay true to the original intent of the voter. Some of you were here at an exhaustive meeting where the eligibility of dozens of positions were debated and voted on individually, Mr. Lachelet and Mr. Hidalgo. That rubric should continue to be used and applied to today's agenda items. Finally, every dollar spent on something other than raising salaries will limit your ability to address raises. If you use this fund to pay entire salaries, 20 here, 30 there, the result is that when you get to the point where you feel pressed to raise teacher salaries, you won't have the money. You will either have to get it from general fund or raise taxes. This, the 2002 tax, is the vehicle for which salary increases were intended. By 2014, we had gone from number 1 to 27 again. In 2022, we were at 43rd in the state. This is not the time to divert money from that for full salaries. It will lessen our ability to address the salary concern. The tax was written with the possibility to use it to plug general fund budget shortfalls. It was written precisely so that it would be protected from subjective use. And finally, just 2 quotes from 2 business people. Terry Rogers at that time, local businessman, said, "We need assurance that the school board would not be able to use the money from the sales tax for other purposes." And the late Dr. David Thibodeau said, "I'm here to tell you that if we spend this on anything other than teacher salaries, we're going to jail."
Thank you.
That's what he said.
Ms. Reed?
Julia Reed, President, Lafayette Parish Association of Educators. Our association made a unanimous vote to oppose this, which is made up of teachers and support staff. I don't know if you heard what Rudy said, but we're at number 43. That's the bottom half, and that's pretty far down the bottom half. And we don't have, I realize the general fund is stretched by charter schools and further action of the legislature in this session. It's going to be stretched. We already have a teacher shortage, it's already here, of certified teachers, of any teachers. And salaries is part of what needs to be addressed. And this fund is the vehicle, as Rudy said, to do so. 43 is unacceptable. Caddo is in front of us, Bossier is in front of us, EBR is in front of us, St. Tammany, Jefferson. They all have higher average salaries than we do. And I think that is a shame because I think Lafayette is a much better school system than any of those school systems. I'm proud to work here. I'm proud to be an LPSS teacher. I would like my salary to reflect the pride that I take in my job. The other teachers would like that their salary would reflect the pride they take in their job. Day in and day out, they pour themselves into children every day. Every day they pour, and we would like to be simply fairly compensated for that. So we'd really like you to consider not adding these whole salaries, because every penny that goes to a whole salary is one that doesn't go to a raise. Or if you so choose not to give raises, to the 13th check, that is less money going into every teacher's pocket. So we really, really, really urge you to rethink this and not put these teacher salaries on the fund. Teachers have been hit recently with a lot of hard news, and they are feeling it. They're feeling some low morale, even if it's not a change that comes to their school. So to then take away something that they possibly could have is going to be a further blow to their morale. And some people are getting priced out of the profession, not just out of Lafayette Parish, but out of the profession, period. They can't make ends meet with their family on a teacher's salary. So anything that's going to cause us not to be able to lift those salaries up where they should be, which is in the top 20, because we are in the top, right? We're one of the best performing urban school districts. Our pay should reflect that. Thank you.
Any more public comment? Hearing none. Any board comment?
Yes.
Mr. Dalga.
It was said that that the teachers in the district are 43rd across the state. Is that 43rd in salary, or is that 43rd in pay? Total pay.
Ms. Gardner?
Mr. Touchette, I don't know anything about that statistic of what it is, where we rank as far as 43rd. I haven't heard that number.
So I have heard from a few teachers on this topic by way of phone call, and there's much confusion about what the 13 check is versus the 14 check and all these checks. But I'll read directly from the classroom teacher sales tax proposition, and nowhere in here, and forgive me if I'm mistaken, but nowhere in here does it talk about pay raises. It talks about salaries, talks about benefits. And even for those who disagree with the administrative rule, which was approved prior to the taxpayers voting on this tax initiative, the ballot measure itself says teacher salaries and benefits. It doesn't say pay raises. And you know, the 14th check, the 13th check is an interest check, and that gets confused a lot. The 14th check is the windfall, for lack of a better term, of the increase in sales tax. And our teachers absolutely deserve that. But our school system also deserves to have the adequate resources it needs to do its job. And I would never suggest that we would take this money and pay it toward anything other than the salaries and benefits that will help achieve the goals that were stated in the sales tax proposition. And because it was limited on words, more specifically, the administrative rule.
Any other board comment?
Present.
Ms. LeBeau.
Thank you for clarifying that on the 13th and the 14th check, because I think that does get a little confusing. I know that we did have an additional stipend that did come from the general fund across the board, correct? But that is not being considered. I guess that's why he was asking about the 43rd in the state. We're not including all those one-time stipends from the legislature, from us, from this additional payout from the sales tax, correct?
Yes, because it's not a permanent, it was
Correct.
only a one-time stipend.
Okay, so does that answer your question about the salary?
Yes, if we were 43rd in salary, then we need a little bit more of a transparent explanation. If we're 43rd in pay, then that's problematic, more problematic than being 43rd in salary because of all the stipends, the 14th check, and the additional pay given. If you say we're 43rd, but we're talking about salary, it's not necessarily a fair representation in my opinion.
Yeah, I would like to see that breakdown too, if we could have that, just so that everybody can have that collectively in front of them, just so we can show, you know, the different, because there are different buckets that they're getting dollars from. And so I just want everybody to have that information so that we don't have that messaging getting out that we're, you know, that's not including the full picture, I guess, of this year's pay, just so that everybody can be educated on that. Thank you.
Ms. Trahan?
So, this fund currently, which group of employees specifically does this fund pay out anything to, any amount of money to?
Ms. Gordon?
Currently, all teachers that are on the teacher pay scale and the salary booklet, we have two main pay scales that are in the schools. We have a teacher pay scale and an instructional pay scale. Anyone that is on the teacher pay scale is eligible for the 2002 sales tax. So when the 13th interest check or the 14th reserve check is issued, it would be anyone on the teacher pay scale. Currently, we have 57 teachers that have been in the tax all these years that we pay full salaries for. We also, we offer optional in-service days to teachers. That is a full day of pay. So if a teacher makes $180 a day, well, I'm sorry, I made 182 was my first year. That's why I keep using that number. So whatever their day rate is, if they choose to go to that in-service day, that pays for, this tax pays for those optional in-service days and professional development training.
Mr. Hand, let me clarify a few different things as far as this is concerned. All we're trying to do is to maximize what the tax could be used for. Anytime that you take the teacher-student ratio and you lower it where there is going to be lower class sizes, in a master schedule, that will be more employees that you're going to need to do that. We are just doing just that. In some of our schools, there needs to be a lower classroom size. We need to be able to take advantage of that. Another thing is that we're using is that we have students that leave the 8th grade and they need an extra remedial math so that they can be successful as they get into the requirements as far as graduation. These particular individuals would also be used. So we're just trying to take advantage that what the tax is actually asking for, and I'll go back to is, and nowhere did we see that it says anything about giving across the board raises. This is about looking at how do we provide more resources to our kids who need those resources and making sure that we're kind of closing that gap so that that is an opportunity for our kids to be successful.
Yes.
So, of course, I'm a new school board member, so I want to be able to understand this because this is from so many years ago, and I received so many different emails and contacts regarding this. So I need to feel comfortable in what my decision is going to be today. So I heard what Ms. Gardner said, and Superintendent Touchette, I also heard what you said. So I just want to make certain I'm hearing that the group that we want to include to disperse additional expenses out of this fund, that this is allowable, and it's clear in the documentation, the law, all the thing.
Yes, ma'am.
And we can provide that to, I think, Julie, I'm not sure where she went, LPAE, or she's just hiding behind. So we can provide that information so that she can have that documentation and they can have that documentation.
Yes, ma'am. And currently, like I said, we've been paying for, I've been up here since 2019, and we've had between 58, 57 teachers that are currently being paid all these years in the tax.
Thank you.
And they are the classroom teachers that follow the administrative document.
Thank you.
Any more board comment? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote.
Nine for, none against.
Motion carries. Mr. Dugas, 2.10, please.
2.10 is the debt service funds. This is all the debts of Lafayette Parish, including the amount that recently issued for Lafayette High, Prairie, and Bob Lilly Elementary. I would bring your attention to the third page, which lists the schedule of debt over time. As you can see, we're actually going to see a $2 million increase in fiscal year '26, and then it pretty much stays stable at 22.5 million through 2033. So we do not have a significant drop-off in debt service. One of the ways we financed Lafayette High, Bob Lilly, and Prairie was that we had paid off the series of schools built with Galette. I think there was 4 or 5 schools that we built at that time, J. Wallace James, a couple of other ones. That debt was 20-year debt. That was paid off, and the debt service dropped, so we were able to issue new debt to get back to the same budget amount, and that's how we partially built Lafayette High, Prairie, and Bob Lilly. That opportunity will not reappear until 2033 at this point. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that particular page, which just shows the total debt service of the district as of now. Any questions on debt service?
Do we have any board member questions before we adjourn this special budget meeting? Ms. LeBouf?
Mr. Dugas, does this include the retirement unaccrued liability that we have on the unfunded accrued liability? No. Okay, I just want to.
No, this is purely debt bonds.
Okay.
Bonds and certificates of indebtedness. The last time we had a economic downturn, the federal government issued all kind of new things, QZABs, QSKIBs. There were all these special where we got some really good deals on some debt. So it's a variety of things, but it's only debt, not liability.
All right. This meeting is adjourned. Regular board meeting will be at 5 p.m.